Hello, everyone. Just doing a quick mic check here. The daily study group is going to get started in about 4 minutes at the top of the hour. It's our final session, and we're going to be covering that last part of the book on ChatGPT gets its Wolfram Superpowers. I'll get that pop-up offer for the book link into your screen here shortly. Get questions in that Q&A pane, and we'll start here in a few minutes. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. I'm Cassidy with the WolframU team, and today is our fifth and final session of the daily study group, What is ChatGPT doing, and why does it work? We actually have Alan Joyce today to go through many examples from this last section of Stephen's book, and Arbin here as well. We'll touch on some final items before we close out. I did want to go ahead and make sure that everyone knows that the quiz link is available there. It's in your recording email, and you can take and pass that quiz. Oops, sorry, 1 second here. You can take and pass that quiz at any time before the 20th of September, and we will be able to get you a completion certificate for the series. I've also put a link to the excuse me, to our daily study group page overall. That's one to just bookmark and go back and check. We're always adding new ones. Right now, I think we have Monday starting a 3-week elementary introduction to Wolfram language, and then following shortly after that is an introduction to complex analysis for late November, and then we'll probably start back up in January. Um, Also a link to the machine learning or the exploring AI foundations with Wolfram tools course sequence. Actually, this week we did the introduction to machine learning lesson, but you can always go and re-sign up for that. But we've got one on neural networks and one on LLM tools that we're going to be showing. So we hope that you sign up if you want to kind of continue this AI and LLM discussion. But there is tons to discuss today. So I think I'm going to pass to Arbin first, I think, to welcome Alan and say what he's going to be covering. And yeah, I'll be back at the end. Arbin?
Yeah, all right, just briefly. So, as I mentioned yesterday, Alan is from the Wolfram Alpha team, and he'll be telling us about some of the integrations that we've been kind of hinting at these last couple days between Wolfram Language, Wolfram Alpha, and ChatGPT. So, as you might recall, there are a couple of fundamental issues with LLMs. The two primary things are largely that they don't have a way to really understand what it is about the world that's actually true. They just kind of know what's in their training data. And then the other problem that they have, that's kind of a serious one, if you need to use them for serious work, is that they're not so good at doing directly algorithmic tasks. And it just so happens that a computational language like Wolfram language addresses both of these because it has factual information about the world, which is human curated, not kind of randomly, quote unquote, generated or even web scraped, but actually curated. And then, of course, fundamentally, Wolfram language is a powerful tool for doing computations. That was its original intent, after all. So, by adding these two pieces of functionality to ChatGPT, you can really extend its functionality. Well, that's kind of a tautological sentence, but it's true. So, I'll pass it to Alan to walk us through some of this integration.
Great. Thanks very much, Arbin. Hopefully you've got my screen here. So my talk after Arbin's excellent coverage of Stephen's book the rest of this week. This last part is relatively brief and simple compared to this plumbing of the depths of what's going on really under the hood with ChatGPT. This is also the part that really has changed quite a lot since the book came out, since that first blog post came out, describing ways of giving ChatGPT its Wolfram superpowers. Um, when this first came out, we were in the kind of pre tool calling, pre LLM agent kind of era, where what we were trying to demonstrate then was, hey, if there's a way of directly linking these things together, Wolfram Alpha, Wolfram Language could, as Arbin said, help to compensate for some of the inherent shortcomings of LLMs. So if we kind of go back to the beginning here, when we were seeing the first ChatGPT models come out, everybody was kind of amazed. This is the first time you're seeing this really convincing, human, natural sounding text. Write me an essay about anything, and you get something that sounds very much like a person would write. Not very robotic. But for us, we're dealing with computational, real world data, real world knowledge about things. It was easy to see where the cracks were. So, just asking a question of ChatGPT, asking a direct question to kind of see what its grasp of the facts was. You'd find, the distance from Chicago to Tokyo. Here's this very, nicely worded, verbose, sensible description of things. But fundamentally, this is wrong. This is off by, 1,000 or so miles. So we were thinking at the time, this is exactly the kind of thing that Wolfram Alpha excels at. We give it a natural language input, uh, use our parser to turn that into a semantic representation of that input, turn that into a query that looks up some data, does some computation, and gives a very precise result. So the difference between those two things, this sounds very nice, but it's just fundamentally wrong. Here we get the right answer. It's something that's reproducible. You can understand how the computation was done. Um, and so when the book came out, if you're reading the book, you're going to see a lot of kind of very hacky early ways that we were thinking about bringing Wolfram Alpha and the Wolfram knowledge base into ChatGPT. So this was one example that Stephen had in the book. Tell me about livestock populations in Turkey. And what this did was, here's a nice overview. It's a major producer of these things. It's claiming to give you data from the FAO as of a specific date. This seems very authoritative. It's sourced. It's got real numbers. But then we were kind of realizing this is not actually the correct numbers. If we looked at the data from the FAO, which we have in Wolfram Alpha from 2020, these are not at all the correct values. Um, so what we were suggesting was this kind of workflow. Ask ChatGPT to come up with basically Wolfram Alpha queries. So here are all the facts in this text. Um, you know, how would you ask Wolfram Alpha to verify them? Number of chickens, number of turkeys, blah 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 blah. Um, Suggesting we can feed those into Wolfram Alpha. We're here just using the Wolfram Alpha function in the Wolfram language, gives you kind of a more direct programmatic interface to Wolfram Alpha. So feeding in all those inputs, asking for a plain textual response, because this was something that we wanted to kind of have this dialogue with ChatGPT, and we're thinking, ChatGPT, its inputs and outputs are human text, human speech. So let's have Wolfram Alpha produce data that we can feed back to it in that kind of way that it can ingest the data most easily. And then we were saying, you can insert this into the original response, highlight them, and then this is great. Here's ChatGPT. It's the original text that it came up with, but we've given it actual factual data from our knowledge base, and it's able to insert that in here. And so you get kind of the combination of the factual content from our knowledge base combined with this very nice, readable human way of tying it all together and presenting the content. Um, so since then, this changed very quickly. So 2023, I think, when this first came out, and so what we were seeing was, then we start seeing plugins for ChatGPT. We start seeing people figuring out how to let LLMs make tool calls. So calling external APIs, doing other kinds of computation, pulling other data in from other resources. And so, very quickly, with the original plugin for ChatGPT and then the custom GPT, this is something that just happens automatically under the hood. You use our custom GPT. You say, "Tell me about livestock populations in Turkey." ChatGPT says, "Well, this is the kind of thing that I can get this information from Wolfram Alpha." It makes a call to Wolfram Alpha. It gets the data in, and then it can give you a response. Here it's being very terse, but you could say, "Give me a little bit more of a verbose response," and get something there. And so this is great that the result here is now you've got access to a huge amount of reliable, curated data. Um, and one second, I think I need to. There we go. Uh, just wanted to share some more examples here. Sorry, is my screen not changing?
No, it's static on the notebook right now.
Yeah, one second. Here we go. Okay. Um, so with the Wolfram GPT, then what you've got is access to all of this content. So the GPT, ChatGPT, with that custom version knows I can call Wolfram Alpha, I can send natural language queries, and I can get reports back, specific results. I can get you know precise date and time conversions. I can explore anatomical data. Um, Asking questions like this, which ChatGPT could probably give a good answer for this because it's more kind of conceptual. But Wolfram Alpha, you get the benefit of other kinds of computations and being able to generate visualizations on the fly for things that you're interested in. Um, and certainly, mathematical functions, doing any kind of math and being able to get plots, charts, maps, all these kinds of things. So having this kind of direct um, plug into um, second into everything that Wolfram Language and Wolfram Alpha have to offer was a huge step forward. Now, in order to make that happen, what we had started to have to do was create new APIs that were designed to be called, not by people. We've had APIs for Wolfram Alpha that return essentially the full results that you get on the web. We've had APIs that return just spoken results or short answers or all kinds of different ways of getting Wolfram Alpha results back. Um, and so we had started with thinking, well, what does, again, an LLM is generally a big machine for ingesting text. Certainly now we've gone into multimodal models, but um, at the time we were focused much more on text input. And so we came up with a Wolfram Alpha API for LLMs. Not that there's an LLM under the hood, but basically this is an API that we meant for an LLM to be able to call and get data out that is in a format that's going to be most convenient and efficient for it to ingest that data and then work it into its results. So for an example, this is Wolfram Alpha, a web result just for an input like solar eclipse. And you get, there's an input interpretation, there's a result, there's all the other kinds of entrained data that you get there. We generate some visualizations. The API for LLMs, this is the result for the LLM. So it's basically kind of a plain text, but still semi-structured version of the Wolfram Alpha output, including things like assumptions and with kind of tips for the LLM. If you wanted to use this a different way, like maybe you're just looking for the definition of solar eclipse, this is what you need to pass back into the API. But then, this is the precise interpretation of what we think you were looking for. And then here's all the data, down to if visualizations were generated, then here's a URL where you can go and you can grab that visualization. And then, ChatGPT, the web interface, other LLMs generally online, are very good at working with generating output in Markdown. And so they can just pull in a URL, show that in Markdown, it gets included in the results that's showing online. Um, the Wolfram Language API for LLMs, a little bit different because this was an API where we thought, okay, we're seeing LLMs, especially at the time ChatGPT, certainly other LLMs have also been getting much, much better at writing code of all kinds, including Wolfram Language. So what we wanted was an API that would not just let an LLM send Wolfram Language code and evaluate it and get a result back. Same kind of way. We want an API that's going to return not just the results, but also kind of helpful information for the LLM, knowing that often when you're in kind of a situation where you're looking for code assistance with an LLM, the LLM can need help. It doesn't necessarily get things right, and if you know a language really well, then you've got kind of an advantage because you can say, well, I think you did this wrong, try this. If you're not really familiar with it, then it can be a lot harder. So we have things like the Wolfram Language API for LLMs. It'll evaluate code, but there's also some other things happening on the back end. There are certain common coding errors that we were noticing that LLMs would make. There's a little bit of autocorrection, sometimes just simple things like matching brackets around code. or other things where they're just sort of common errors that LLMs would mix idioms from one language with those in another. Because it's been trained on all this code in all these languages, and sometimes kind of thinks it can mix and match more than it can. So, for example, this is one query that would be sent to the Wolfram Language API for LLMs, and this is pretty straightforward. It's a valid Wolfram language code. What comes back is here's the output. It's a link to an image that you can display in Markdown. Here's code that has an invalid option, and so this is something where we're not just saying that's not a valid for option for this function. We also have sort of recommended solutions. So to make sure that LLMs don't kind of get caught in a loop where they just keep saying, and if you've done any kind of interactive coding with an LLM, I'm sure you've seen this. Um, well, that didn't work. Let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. We wanted to steer it in a better direction. So this would be saying, this isn't a valid option. Maybe you don't know what the options are. Here's a suggestion. Send this code, and you're going to get all the valid options for that function. Um, or things like this. If you're working with entity value data that's in the knowledge base that's integrated into the Wolfram language, um, then here's a case where this is an area where we see a lot of hallucinations coming from LLMs, where you say, write some Wolfram language code to get the height of the Empire State Building, and it'll make up some canonical name for the building. And so here's a case where we're saying, this is a code. This is not a valid entity. If you want to find a valid entity, then submit the name of that entity to interpreter, and you're going to get something else. We had some other things that we developed here also. That, sorry, let me switch one more time here. Where we developed some other kind of utility APIs. So for things like this, helping the LLM know how to get correct semantic representations of kind of more complex kinds of data lookups. So this was an example. Like this is using some of these utility APIs. Use Wolfram language to find the 5 tallest buildings in New York City, compare them in a bar chart. ChatGPT goes, makes a few calls to the cloud, and then comes up with a bar chart. It doesn't show up because of how OpenAI handles sharing. It doesn't have images, but here's the data. And so then if you ask it to explain this, what it was actually doing is saying, okay, I need to find the 5 tallest buildings in New York City. Rather than trying to, write from scratch a complex implicit entity class expression, we have some prompting that says, to send a simple natural language input to a semantic interpretation API. And what it gets out is the semantic representation of that input. So then it can take that input, feed that in, get the properties out that it wants. We want to get the height, we want to get the cities, and it gets the data. And then from there, it knows, it does a good job of just writing a bar chart that's going to take those values, and it ends up with an image of the bar chart. So this kind of progression here that we went through, figuring out what are the things that someone wants to be able to do with an LLM. What are the ways we can make it easier for LLMs to basically put their hands on Wolfram Alpha and Wolfram language, and really streamline that process? So we came up with all these other custom APIs for things. And now, of course, that has gone a step further. And really, the best place if you want to see ChatGPT or any other LLM enhanced with Wolfram Superpowers is in chat notebooks that Stephen has shown off. We certainly have other courses and resources online to go through these in detail, but we can go back to that initial query from the original blog post here and say, here I'm in a chat book setting. This gives me access to a few different personas, and we can get into those a little bit more later. You can add other ones. You can add tools that the model can call. You can, here we're just using an OpenAI ChatGPT model, but you could certainly go in here and um, if you have an API key for LLMs from other services, there are a lot of other things you can get direct access to. But anyway, so asking ChatGPT in this case, how far is it from Chicago to Tokyo? Same things going on under the hood, calling the ChatGPT API, getting a result back here, which today is a whole lot closer to reality. I mean, this for things like this sort of basic facts and things about the world, especially when you're dealing with very well-known places like Chicago and Tokyo. Certainly somewhere in the massive amount of training data that ChatGPT has ingested. Um, you know, this kind of information is somewhere in there, or something that allows it to give a reasonable approximation. Although still, that requires you to put a lot of trust in ChatGPT. And so, we could follow on from that input and say, well, how did you come up with that answer? Um, And so it's saying, you could use the concept of a great circle distance and calculate it this way. But actually, what I did was just use commonly available data. So again, this kind of gets at the heart of uh, LLMs can be really good at writing text. They definitely have in their training data lots of valid data about the world. The problem is just sometimes things can be a little bit off. Sometimes things can be a huge amount off. And if you're doing any kind of, you're engaged in any kind of pursuit where you really care about precision and accuracy and verifiable and repeatably verifiable facts, then what you really want to be doing is using Wolfram tools so that you can do that kind of stuff more automatically. And so, in contrast, um, same kind of query. In this case, this is using the code assistant persona. Up above, this was using just the raw model. Really nothing else coming in between your query and the API call. Um, Here, this is a different persona that um, has access to a number of other tools. So, the raw persona has none of these attached. The code assistant has some additional tools you can call. So there's a documentation lookup, a documentation search. Um, it can make Wolfram Alpha calls. It can evaluate Wolfram language code. A few other additional things that I can talk about later. But as a result, you ask how far is it from Chicago to Tokyo. It knows, okay, this is a computation. This is something that I can use geodistance and I can get a precise result. It writes the code. It even incorporates essentially control equals inputs, natural language inputs for Chicago and Tokyo. So it's not trying to write out the canonical names for those. It's using the Wolfram Alpha parser to turn these places into their semantic representations, and it's evaluating the code. And you can pop this open, this Wolfram box. You can see the interpreted inputs. You can see the result, and then you get a very specific, reliable, verifiable computed result. And then if you want to understand that better, you can even delve a little further and say, well, like, what's actually going on here? And because the ChatGPT in this setting has more access to Wolfram documentation, it can give you a much more detailed explanation of, okay, this is what that function is actually doing. You want to see how that function works. You want to understand some of the details about what's really happening under the hood. Here you go. So this is obviously really powerful. Now, going back to Arbin's comment from the beginning, certainly for the most part, people are not firing up ChatGPT or any other LLM because they want to use it like a calculator. But it is worth kind of paying attention to how good LLMs are at being calculators to understand just how far from the truth things can get when you're doing anything more complicated. Basic math. It's a fairly large exponent, but what's 3 to the power of 73? Um, Calculating that results in a very large number, no surprise. Using a calculator or a computational tool, which it hasn't actually done, you get this number, which is absolutely incorrect. In contrast, use the code assistant. What's 3 to the power of 73? Very simple. Let's evaluate it. You get an answer. This is clearly not the right answer. Um, or certainly if you want to gather other real world information that's relying on, there's some temporal aspect, there's some geographic aspects, there's other kinds of computation that are involved. Ask an LLM what constellations will be visible from Chicago at 10 p.m. tonight. And this is not a bad answer. This is kind of hand wavy. You have to consider this. Here are some autumn constellations. This may or may not be accurate in most cases. Um, it's not a bad result. It's a typical kind of LLM generated web summary kind of result. Probably not what you want if you really want a very specific answer. And so, what constellations will be visible from Chicago? Here's a case where this turns to the Wolfram Alpha tool, and it'll just make a query to Wolfram Alpha. It gets the results. Here's a long list of things telling, what's above, below the horizon, rise and set times, a sky map. And so you get something here that's much more precise, accurate, detailed. You can understand where the data is coming from. Um, so really useful kind of thing. And then certainly when you're getting into, trying to write code, and in some cases, it's not really that you want to write code, it's that you've got a particular problem you want to solve. You've got something you want to be able to visualize, you've got something you want to analyze, but you're not really sure how to go about doing that. um, this is the thing for me where this has been the most powerful and the most useful on a daily basis. Even as someone who's at least mediocre level in writing Wolfram language, to be able to have this tool at my fingertips to come up with things very quickly. So a basic question, and this could be sort of more of a factual thing. I'm just trying to understand this concept in general. What's the euro dollar exchange rate been over the last year? And so another case, this is one where here it turned to Wolfram language, and it's pretty straightforward. Dates, making a financial data call, making a date list plot. Here's a value. And this is kind of showing what's happening under the hood, pulls it out, shows you a nice result in your chat session. And so then I'm thinking, well, that's interesting, but maybe I want to be able to work with that data a little bit more. And so you can build on that and say, can you help me turn that into an interactive object? Um, so it does a pretty good job of this. It writes some code, turns it into a manipulate, explains what it's doing in all these parts, politely asks me if it wants me to evaluate it. So it does, and I get this out, and it's pretty good. It makes sense, although this is kind of strange. Um, I can see how it's sort of the date range that I was asking for, but it's chosen to do time ranges as fractions for some reason. Um, and so this is another thing, build on what you've got. That's not exactly what I wanted. Those are kind of weird. Why don't you use real quantities? Um, Also, because I just happen to know that this is not necessarily, and is another one of those kind of odd artifacts that has come out of its massive training set. Um, I'm just telling it, you can drop that. So it goes back in, keeps everything that was good, changes the things that were bad, and you get another version of this out that is, a nice functional manipulate showing, currency exchange rates over the last 6 months, 1 year, 5 years for a range of things. So this has been one of the things that's really kind of powerful for somebody who, you might have a specific coding project, or you might just have a subject that you want to explore, and having something at hand that can say, there's a way we can visualize that. There's a way we can analyze that data. I can write a tool for you, or help you create a tool that's going to help you understand this topic better. Has been the really powerful thing. Um, and certainly these can be much more elaborate. And this was an example that our colleague Michael Trott had come up with kind of early in the days of looking at ChatGPT. and playing around with a lot of different kinds of Fermi estimations. Very complicated problem. We don't really think we can get a precise answer, but let's think through how you would estimate these values. Um, and this is kind of interesting. It's the kind of thing that an LLM can do pretty well on its own, but that's still another case where it may come up with numbers and do calculations in the course of this very long exploration, and very small errors can get compounded over time. And so this is the kind of thing that's been really, I think, interesting and useful for me, having the Wolfram integration, where here, help me through figuring out how to estimate how many photons from sunlight hit the back of the eye of every person in Pittsburgh in an average day. Kind of crazy. But it walks through, okay, these are the steps. I want to do this. I want to do this calculation. I'm going to make some assumptions about certain values. Um, you know, all these kinds of things that it's going to kind of walk through. So doesn't always get what it wants. Here was a case where there's a value we didn't have in Wolfram Alpha. So it falls back and it has an assumption that's pretty good one. It makes a reasonable estimation of a value we're going to use there that makes sense. Um, it has, certainly some valid basic formulas that it's already gotten its training. These are okay. Let's make some other assumptions. And then this is a really useful thing where I've seen a lot of cases of this where you've got these long reasoning chains, and it really only takes one or two places where things haven't been calculated quite right, and the final result is just really far away. It's very hard when you don't have some tool integration here where you can go back and you can look at those steps, you can look at the computations, you can be sure that the value that you got in this step was actually carried over into the next one, and it was a correct value. Um, and so all of these end up getting evaluated. Here's all these different calculations. I get this value. I'm going to feed this value into the next stage. I'm going to feed that value into the next part, and then you end up with kind of a reasonable result at the end. So these are always kind of interesting. And then beyond that, certainly there are a number of other tools that we've developed along the way. And so there are things like uh, the prompt repository. And so some of these are just kind of fun. Some are very useful if you're working with chat notebooks. Um, there are things here that are, a lot of this is focused on kind of text manipulation. But let me see. There were some ones that I always enjoyed here, like uh, legal dejargonize. Just some helpful little things where you have prompts where you might have some task where you are repeating some sort of operation, and this is useful because there's some good kind of clear prompting for a specific task under the hood here, where you've got, like in this case, big chunks of legal jargon that you want to represent in kind of natural language. Exactly the kind of thing that LLMs tend to be good at, but it can be hard to get a prompt that really does a good job of giving you exactly what you want on the output. There's also a small, and this is still kind of in development, but what I was pointing to before, there is a tool repository, and you can click a button here and get a notebook that you can use to build your own tools. And this has been a really powerful thing, I think, for anybody who's using LLMs um, uh, locally for specific tasks. This was one that I had a use for, actually, in kind of doing some Wolfram Alpha work. Was we realized kind of early on that uh, ChatGPT, other LLMs, even though they've been trained on basically all the open content on the web, including things like Wikipedia and Wikidata, um, that they still will hallucinate facts from those things. And so we were kind of trying, can you do a web search, or can you write a Sparkle query to get data out of Wikidata for some kind of complex query? And ChatGPT would hallucinate. If you know anything about Wikidata, sort of items and properties are represented with these numeric codes. If you want to look things up, you need to know them. And ChatGPT would just confidently look up totally invalid or wrong codes. Um, so this was kind of a funky tool that I had written at one point that taught it how to um, use Wolfram language functions like Wikidata search and Wikidata data to look up the correct property and item identifiers, and then run some of those queries to get data. So you can do things here like you plug in this tool and you can say something like, I want to find information on left-handed female politicians in Wikidata, which is something that we couldn't right now answer, say, in Wolfram Alpha. And so this is actually a good example. It actually thinks that it has come up with the right properties on its own. Sorry, I think I just realized I hadn't switched my screen here, but let me go over here. Sorry, this is a LLM tool notebook. And so asking the LLM this question, and then it actually hallucinated at least one property in here. Didn't work. So then it did what I told it to do, did a search for all those properties, came up with the right identifiers, and then ran this query and actually got the data I was looking for out of Wikidata. So this is a very kind of wonky, very special purpose tool that I had some use for. But it's the kind of thing that's really, really powerful here, is that it's not just ChatGPT or any other LLM plus Wolfram Alpha and plus Wolfram Language. It's those LLMs plus Wolfram Alpha, Wolfram Language, and all of the other things that you can build with Wolfram Language to extend the built-in functionality. So resources from the Wolfram function repository, data from the Wolfram data repository, these additional prompt resources, LLM tools, all of this stuff that you can dig in and kind of build on what's already there. And so there's certainly other LLM related functionality. I think that I'm gonna kind of wrap it up here, but anybody who's doing any kind of work, it's the chat notebooks are sort of the easiest interface on here, where you're really just having a conversation with the LLM. But there's a whole lot of other tools available for people who want to write code, repeatable tasks that you want to run that leverage some of the LLM power under the hood somehow. So writing functions that are built into other kinds of arbitrary code that can send data out, or ask an LLM to perform some operation. Newly released tools in I think 14.1 with doing more with semantic search and building semantic search indices and using those to extend the knowledge of LLMs in particular areas. So a lot of functionality here that we built on, and I for me, this has been by far the best environment to be exploring LLM capabilities in, and building on what they're all already able to do, and combining them with what Wolfram Alpha and Wolfram Language brings to the table. So I don't think that I've got more that I necessarily need to cover. I don't know if there are questions. I haven't been tracking the questions on the stream very closely. I don't know if there's anything that's still open there that should people would want to cover, or Arbin, if there's anything you want to come back to here.
Yeah, I think what we can do is, if people have questions for Alan about any of this functionality, they can go ahead and ask them in the Q&A pane now. I will probably point out a couple of things that we have addressed at least shortly in the Q&A pane, but I also do have a question for you to get this started. So when you use these integrations and you say something like, oh, okay, it knows here that this is a computable question, and so it's going to make a call to Wolfram. What is it that keys off the LLM that, oh, this is a question that Wolfram will be good at answering?
Generally, prompting that's under the hood. If we're talking about the custom the original plugin for ChatGPT, the custom Wolfram GPT, or when you're dealing with chat books, there is additional prompting that's gone into each of those things that gets invoked when you start a chat session, and it tells the LLM, these are the tools you have available. These are the kinds of things that you can use these tools to accomplish. I mean, it helps sort of in general, uh, you know, any large LLM kind of comes with an understanding of
Hey,
what,
Arben or Alan, can
yeah,
one of you guys share a screen? There's like nothing being shown right now.
sure. I don't really.
Just even a chat
Yeah,
GPT screen would be fine.
I'll go back to the the notebook. Um, sorry. Um, I think that sorry. The any large LLM, I think, kind of knows what Wolfram Alpha is, right? There's even if it can't, access the data that's in Wolfram Alpha, there's an understanding just from all the training material that's gone in. Wolfram Alpha is a tool that can take natural language queries and it can answer questions about math, geography, music, sports, whatever else. There's an understanding. The
Right.
Wolfram language is, they certainly have an understanding of what functions are in the language. They can write code. They understand the scope of kind of the integrated data. But there's definitely prompting in all those things uh, to kind of guide the LLM through how to think about writing code, how to make a decision between should I call Wolfram Alpha? Is this something that I just want a simple answer for? Like, do I really need to do a complex computation here? Or is this something where what I want is a quick answer and some other context from Wolfram Alpha? That making that decision is kind of the first thing in a lot of the prompting, and the rest is, more fine tuning and some suggestions about consulting documentation and particular kinds of errors that LLMs tend to make.
Okay, that makes some sense. So, there's some built-in information just from the training data about, what's possible with these languages, and then there's extra
Right.
prompting about this. And the prompting is enough because, with the reasonably good understanding of language, if we can call it that an LLM has, it can kind of make the connection between, oh, okay, you're saying that for these types of computations, I should do this. And so when I look at a particular prompt, I can kind of classify that into one type or another and determine whether I should be using a tool for it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty neat then.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we have a couple questions from the audience. So there's a question from Lucas, and this is something that comes up pretty frequently, actually. Maybe you can offer some clarification on it.
Sure.
So the question is, I'll just share it on the screen. What is the recommended way to make this chat interaction between, I assume, Wolfram functions and ChatGPT? So should you use ChatGPT with the Wolfram GPT plugin? Should you use a chat notebook, or is there some other way? Or why would you pick one versus the other?
I think it's what you have available. If you've got Wolfram language access, that's always going to be my first preference. It's easier to switch between models. It's easier to having access to a chat session in a notebook. And maybe this is something that's worth kind of showing here. One second. I think the sorry. Okay. The thing about dealing with like the Wolfram GPT, if you're going on the web, you can start a new chat, you can have a chat, you can kind of copy paste things out of that chat and work on things elsewhere. But for me, just having the notebook interface is just enormously helpful. For things like, maybe I should just go back down here. The code assistance here. This kind of interaction where uh, I've got a question, it's writing some code. This is the kind of thing you can do online. Um, you certainly can't see interactive plots on the web. The API and the ChatGPT website can only show you static things right now. The fact that you can, in one notebook, you can also do things like, I can insert uh, a delimiter here. And so I've got this chat up above, and that's kind of one chat session, but I could start another one down here, and I could have this other session in the notebook use an entirely different model. I could have a session down here use a different set of tools. And it's going to be sort of isolated from this thing up here. So for it, I think that the best setting for me is certainly working in a Wolfram notebook. And that could be desktop, it could be Wolfram Cloud. Certainly you can access ChatGPT things there. You do need to have a uh, OpenAI API key to be able to use things in the notebooks. So sometimes people, I think, still get a little bit confused by, I have a ChatGPT Plus subscription. How do I plug that into Wolfram? That's not really how it works, because the chat notebooks are using the API, which is a separate thing from the ChatGPT web access. But certainly the notebook environment it's more powerful. I think for me it's a better choice, but there's cases where the web is fine.
Yeah, I think that I kind of align with that as well. Of course, we have access to Wolfram language, so it might be easy for us to say.
Yeah.
But certainly, if you have access, the notebook is a nice environment. One more thing about working in chat notebooks that I don't see mentioned too often is that in a chat notebook, you can use all these different models and everything, right? But you can also just type straight up Wolfram language code yourself.
Mhm.
And the thing about a chat notebook is that usually in a Wolfram notebook, the kind of order that things appear in the notebook doesn't really matter. What matters is the order that you evaluate your cells in. But in a chat notebook, whenever you do a chat input, it looks up in the notebook. So wherever your chat input is, it looks up all the way to the beginning or to one of these chat delimiter cells that you see in Alan's notebook there, the little gray
Right.
bar. And so if you've written a bunch of code and you've said, I've saved this image as, my cool image, you can then in a chat cell say, could you help me to binarize my cool image? And it will have access to my cool image. It will actually embed the code that makes up my cool image in the embeddings that we've talked about throughout the week and use that as an input. And what it can do is that it can, say, oh, okay, yeah, sure. I can use the binarization function on my cool image, and that looks like this, and here's the output. Or I can use my cool image in a manipulate, or I can, do some sort of color negation or segmentation or whatever it might be. So you can refer to variables that you have saved outside of chat cells, inside of chat cells, which can be very, very powerful. Instead of
Right.
like only being a conversational back and forth tool, you can really use it as a contextually aware tool. Let's see here, we got a couple more. So Krasimir asks, does the new development from OpenAI regarding the extended inference time diminish or increase the value of a computational language plugin? I'd have to see exactly what the mechanics are behind that. I'm not sure if Alan has a feel for that. Let's see if I can use one.
I haven't had a chance to play around with the. We're talking about the O1 model, Strawberry, the thing that just came out yesterday.
So, some people definitely brought that up in the chat as well. So I assume that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure yet. I mean, I think that it's going to be For things that require more complicated reasoning, I would expect it to be much better. And that they're certainly making the claim that it's going to improve math and other things. I've seen some people commenting, just this morning, people have been testing this, and there are still just fundamental errors that it makes in math, because that still isn't something that LLMs are good at or necessarily designed to do. And
Yeah, it's kind of an
I'm
architectural issue with these things. So I
right.
wouldn't
I
be
mean,
surprised if you could improve it,
yeah,
but it's not going to replace something that is, actually has these algorithms built in.
right. I am interested to play around with it, certainly for more complicated kinds of projects, and things that require more stages of reasoning and more complicated kinds of reasoning. But the difference between reasoning and calculation or computation, and I still am not seeing that the calculation computation part is making a huge leap forward. I think it's great if this means that the model is going to be better at using tools intelligently and figuring out when and how to use them. Because that's something that we've seen problems with. So that's what I'm interested.
Yeah, I think we look forward to testing that. Let's see here. Question. So Rebel from YouTube asks, and this is one I think I can handle. Not sure where to access this functionality, like Wolfram and LLM API access. So if you have the appropriate OpenAI account, is it maybe a ChatGPT Plus account? They keep changing the names. You can get an API key from that account, and then if you have Wolfram Language Open, all you have to do is go to Wolfram settings, and there's a whole page in the AI. There's like a whole page dedicated to AI settings where you can put in any API key for any of the services we support, and then your chat notebooks will just work. And there was a repeated question from Luis about how do you get the key for ChatGPT. So you have to have the particular OpenAI account. Again, the name escapes me. Alan might know the current name.
Well, there's, like I was saying before, there's different things. There's the OpenAI API, and there's the the ChatGPT subscriptions, and if you have I think you're right, it's still ChatGPT Plus. If you have a ChatGPT Plus subscription, that doesn't give you an API key. That just lets you access ChatGPT on the web. If you want to use ChatGPT with chat notebooks, you need an OpenAI API key, and that is a separate subscription to pay for. That's not part of the ChatGPT web subscription.
And to confirm kind of what we're saying here in response to another question we have from YouTube, which is to use chat notebooks, we need an API key from ChatGPT. It doesn't have to be from ChatGPT or OpenAI. We support other models, but if you do want to use ChatGPT specifically in a chat notebook, you will need an OpenAI API key. Yes.
Right. And just to remind, like there is this whole list of things that we've got the plumbing in place to just directly, very easily plug in an API key from some other service, and then that lets you choose between different model versions on the fly and all kinds of things.
Yeah, let's see if there's anything else in here. There's a question about whether in the future you think it would be possible for Wolfram to utilize local smaller models just without having to connect to something online. I can't speak to future directions, but that certainly seems like a reasonable thing to want.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know that I think we're moving in that direction, certainly. Seeing some of the latest open weights models from Meta and others that are getting closer to being runnable on a reasonably powerful personal machine. That's definitely the direction that I think we see things going. We're not quite there where I don't think we're there where you can as easily as this plug in a local model, but there are ways to use the chat functionality in Wolfram with local models running with the Llama and other things. And I think there are articles on the Wolfram community and elsewhere that talk about how to set that up.
All right, that sounds good to me. Let's see here. Is there any option for OLLAMA or LM Studio support? Is OLLAMA one of our supported models?
It's OLLAMA is not. It's not really a model, right? It's a framework for being able to work with local models. Again, that's one if you search on Wolfram Community, and there are some there are a handful of posts I've seen there with people, and then some people who have posted notebooks that have a very easy way of hooking into a local Llama server. So whatever local models you're running, you can access those.
Yeah, perhaps. I wonder if Anton Antonov has some posts about that. It seems likely to me.
Yeah, okay. I think here was one I know. Mark O'Teal had. There was. Oh, yeah. There's a notebook in here. There was a nice kind of easy get up and running with hooking into a local Llama server here. I did this. It worked really well for me. And you can, whatever models are available through Llama, you can install locally and play around with those. In addition to all the, the commercial models that you can just bring an API key into Chatbooks and run.
All right. Well, that's excellent. I'm glad we have somebody, especially somebody as knowledgeable as Marco on Community to help us answer this one. And I think that's all of the questions we have. So is there any last things you'd like to say about the integrations here, Alan, or have you pretty much said your piece?
I think I've said my piece. It's been startling, but really exciting to see how things have developed over the last couple of years. I mean, I still very clearly remember, I guess, the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, and the first release of ChatGPT and those first explorations that I was showing early on, where we were saying, "Oh, this is really cool. You could copy and paste stuff from this into a notebook and run Wolfram alpha code, and then copy and paste that back into ChatGPT and get something out." And to be at this point now where, I'm firing up a notebook and I'm chatting with an LLM and it's firing off queries and calls and writing code and pulling those back into a notebook. Just very, very cool, and just opens up so many more possibilities for people who are, I think, new to Wolfram language and just trying to get a handle on what you can do with it. And even for people who are very experienced, just streamlining some of their workflows and making it a lot easier to explore and prototype things and, get to a point where you're sort of, you're improving code and playing around with ideas without spending tons of time with that initial kind of blank notebook trying to start from scratch and debugging things. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I have to again echo that sentiment. It's been pretty remarkable to see how far the integration has come and how useful it can be in a lot of cases.
Yep.
So, well, we're at time, so I'd like to thank Alan for the presentation. It was great to see some of these integrations we've been alluding to over the week, get their time on screen here. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending. I hope that this was an instructive study group that kind of clued you into some of what's going on and what the future holds for this very popular but somewhat confusing new topic on the social consciousness. So you've all got your recordings. You'll get a recording for today as well. If you have any questions that arise while you're watching these or just something occurs to you, feel free to post about it on community, and we'll do our best to answer your questions there. So thanks again for your attendance, everybody, and I will pass it back to Cassidy to close us out for the week.
Thank you so much, Arbin, and thank you again, Alan, for being here. It really was interesting to get to see all the new things that have been added in the last, like you said, we started the first ChatGPT study group, I think, in April of last year. So a lot has been done in the time. Well, as we've mentioned and Arbin has said, we always encourage you to keep up with us on that community thread. Go get the Stevens book, read through it, sign up for the exploring AI tools exploring AI foundations with Wolfram Tools course sequence to kind of dive further. Arbin teaches 2 of those, I believe, as well. And we hope to see you back at our next study group. Get your quiz done by the 20th, next Friday. And have a great weekend, everyone.